Chapter 26, Seed Plants. The seed, like the amniotic egg and tetrapod vertebrates, allowed plants to become more independent of water. No longer is water needed for reproduction. Seed plants are diverse and have been used by humans for millennia as food, medicine, building supplies, textiles, ornamentals, and so many other uses. Like the seedless vascular plants, the sporophyte stage dominates, but in seed plants, the gametophyte stage is reduced even further to a pollen grain or ovule. Gametophytes in non-vascular and seedless vascular plants are free-living. In seed plants, the gametophyte grows within the sporophyte. All seed plants are heterosporous, producing male and female gametophytes, and most seed plants are dioecious, but there are a few exceptions, such as ginkgo having male and female trees. The strobulus is retained in gymnosperms with male strobili housing male gametophytes, which are essentially pollen grains, making pollen, called microspores, containing sperm. Female strobili house the female gametophyte with a megaspore that divides into 4 megaspore daughter cells. One becomes the embryo, and the rest become seed components such as nutritive endosperm. Seeds are advantageous to spores in that they can survive desiccation and are hardier. They also have adaptations to travel far from the parent plant, preventing competition between parents and offspring. Seeds can also lie dormant for months, years, decades, or thousands of years, separating parents and offspring not only by space, but time, therefore reducing competition. Seed plants first arose 350 million years ago in the Carboniferous period. It was likely a progymnosperm, the precursor to modern gymnosperms like Archaeopteryx, which dominated forests during the late Devonian. By the age of dinosaurs, beginning in the Triassic, gymnosperms began to dominate the landscape, and during the middle of the Cretaceous, Angiosperms began to take over and are still the dominant plant form in existence. The earliest seed plant is from Devonian period 400 million years ago and was a seed fern called Elkinsia polymorpha. By the Carboniferous, seed plants resembling modern tree ferns became more prominent. Progymnosperms evolved 390 million years ago in the Devonian, and while giant tree ferns and lycopods dominated the landscape during the Carboniferous, the Permian period became drier, allowing for progymnosperms to take over. The first true gymnosperms were likely ginkgos, with only one surviving species today. Also, conifers and cycads, a palm-like plant, began to take over during the Jurassic. Today, gymnosperms dominate drier and colder climates, but are outnumbered in other habitats. Gymnosperm female gametophytes are greatly reduced to a few cells such as an unfertilized egg and some supportive structures. Once fertilized, the female gametophyte develops into the sporophyte by making an embryo surrounded by a nutritive tissue called endosperm. It also forms protective layers around the embryo, making the seed. The male gametophyte is the pollen grain, and in gymnosperms it relies on wind, water, and animals for distribution. Pollen is coated with a waterproof structure, thereby getting rid of the necessity of water for reproduction as seen in non-vascular and seedless plants. Once bound to the female gametophyte, it creates a pollen tube for sperm to travel so it is never exposed to air. While gymnosperms dominated the Mesozoic landscape 125 million years ago in the early Cretaceous, and began to dominate gymnosperms by the mid to late Cretaceous. Interestingly, insects began to increase in species number, likely due to the close relationships they have with flowering plants. Angiosperms are not descendants of gymnosperms, but form a sister clade. It is still uncertain where they come from. The oldest living angiosperm is Amborella trichopoda, found in New Caledonia in the South Pacific. Angiosperms produce gametes in separate structures of the flower. The ovary, which houses ovules, becomes the seeds, and when fertilized, and in the ovary becomes a protective fruit preventing damage from the elements. Most flowering plants have co-evolved alongside a pollinator animal, which is quite likely why insects and flowering plants make up some of the largest groups of organisms on Earth. And in our next video, we will focus on the gymnosperms.